Ceuta breached. Europe's border, Europe's responsibility. Only a few days ago, I published an episode asking whether Spain was committing cultural suicide. I expected the argument to remain theoretical for a while. Then, Ceuta happened. Ceuta is a Spanish city on the North African coast. It is part of Spain and part of the European Union. Its frontier with Morocco is therefore an external frontier of Europe. And during a single extraordinary day, Spain's Interior Ministry estimated that around 49,000 people crossed into the enclave from Morocco by land and sea. At least 19 people died. Reception facilities were overwhelmed. Police and soldiers were reinforced. People slept outdoors. Others swam around coastal barriers or forced their way through crossing points. This was not an ordinary migration episode. It was a mass breach of a European border. We should use accurate language. The people crossing were not an army. There is no evidence that they were carrying weapons under military command. Calling every migrant an invader would be false and irresponsible. But pretending that tens of thousands of people overwhelming a border in a matter of hours is merely a humanitarian event would be equally dishonest. A sovereign state has two duties at the same time. It must rescue people who are drowning, and it must control who enters its territory. Those duties are not contradictory. A state can save a life at sea, identify the person afterward, examine any genuine claim for protection, and return those who have no legal right to remain. Compassion without control creates another dangerous journey. Control without law becomes brutality. Europe needs both law and control. Why did this happen now? We do not yet have one proven answer. Summer conditions made swimming and coastal crossings easier. Smuggling networks may have spread information that the route was open. A recent Spanish Supreme Court ruling limited the use of immediate returns for people intercepted while entering by sea. That ruling did not legalize illegal entry. It meant that a special summary procedure designed for breaches of physical border barriers could not automatically be applied in the same way to people intercepted in the water. That distinction may be legally defensible. Operationally, however, every new uncertainty at a border is quickly studied by smugglers. Then there is Morocco. In 2021, during a diplomatic dispute involving Western Sahara, Moroccan controls were relaxed and thousands entered Ceuta. The European Parliament condemned the use of migrants, including minors, as political pressure against Spain. We do not yet know whether Rabat deliberately enabled the present surge. Moroccan forces eventually reinforced the border and used water cannon to prevent further crossings. But the precedent matters. A neighbor that can tighten or loosen migration controls possesses leverage. Europe should never allow access to its territory to become a diplomatic pressure valve in the hands of another government. Spain's own policy also matters. Madrid approved an extraordinary regularization program for migrants who were already living in Spain before the beginning of this year. Applicants had to show at least 5 months of continuous residence, have no criminal record, and present no threat to public order or security. Successful applicants receive an initial 1-year residence and work permit in Spain. The program did not automatically legalize the people entering Ceuta now. It did not grant automatic citizenship, and it did not provide a right to settle or work throughout the rest of the European Union. Those distinctions must be stated clearly. But the political signal cannot simply be ignored. More than 1 million applications were submitted before the deadline. Even when a regularization is legally limited to people already present, It can create an expectation that illegal arrival, followed by enough time, may eventually lead to legal status. That does not prove the program caused the Ceuta crisis. It does mean that a government carrying out such a large regularization has a duty to make the opposite message equally credible. This is exceptional. It will not be repeated automatically. New illegal entry will not be rewarded by waiting. If that message is weak, smugglers will replace it with their own. Ceuta also has a special status within the Schengen system. People traveling from Ceuta to mainland Spain or another Schengen state are subject to identity and document checks. So reaching Ceuta is not the same as receiving an unrestricted pass to Berlin, Paris, or Warsaw. But a failure at one external border still affects the entire Schengen area. Schengen works because Europeans trust that the common external frontier is being managed. When that trust disappears, states restore controls between one another. Free movement then begins to erode for everyone, including citizens traveling legally. Spain's border is therefore Spain's responsibility. But its consequences are European. There is another part of this discussion that Europe too often avoids. The people guarding the border also have human rights. Police officers, soldiers, and border guards are not scenery. They are not human shields expected to absorb stones, knives, vehicles, or organized assaults while politicians debate wording from a safe distance. Poland learned this through tragedy. On the 28th of May 2024, 21-year-old Polish soldier Mateusz Sitek was stabbed through the border barrier while serving on the frontier with Belarus. He died from his wounds on the 6th of June. Later that year, Poland changed its law. The law does not authorize soldiers to shoot at people merely because they cross the border illegally. It does not create a hunting ground. It does, however, permit the use of firearms and other weapons when necessary to repel a direct and unlawful attack on life, health, or freedom. When an attacker uses a firearm, a vehicle, or another dangerous object. When someone attempts to seize an officer's weapon, or when a violent breach directly threatens another person. The law also provides limited protection from criminal liability when immediate action is required, even if every formal step could not be followed perfectly. But firearms remain a last resort. Their use must be necessary, proportionate to the threat, and designed to cause the least possible harm. Force must stop when the threat stops. That is the standard Europe needs at every external border. Let me state this without ambiguity. A person crossing illegally should not be shot simply for crossing. A person swimming toward a beach should be rescued, detained, and processed. A child at a border must be protected. A peaceful person asking for asylum at an official crossing point must have an individual procedure. But when someone attacks an officer with a knife, tries to seize a firearm, drives a vehicle into a line of guards, or participates in a violent breach that creates an immediate danger to life, the officer must have the legal authority to defend himself and others. Not with unlimited force, not without accountability, but with effective force, including live ammunition when no lesser measure can stop an imminent deadly threat. No European border guard should have to choose between being killed in service and being treated as a criminal for lawful self-defense. This principle should become a common European minimum. Every member state would retain its own command structure and criminal law, but the standard should be clear across the external frontier. First, officers must receive realistic training for mass breaches, attacks through barriers, maritime interceptions, and mixed crowds containing both peaceful people and violent aggressors. Second, they must have a graduated range of tools: shields, water cannons, chemical irritants, non-penetrating projectiles, tasers where lawful, and firearms as the final option. Third, every use of a firearm should be documented, medically reviewed where injury occurs, and independently investigated. Fourth, body cameras and fixed surveillance should protect both officers and civilians by recording what actually happened. Fifth, politicians must stop issuing vague orders that leave the person at the fence legally exposed. Rules of engagement must be simple enough to apply in seconds. Border defense cannot rely on force alone. Spain and the European Union also need rapid screening, additional reception capacity, interpreters, medical teams, and judges able to decide cases quickly. People with credible protection claims must receive an individual hearing. People who do not qualify must receive enforceable return decisions. The new European return system is intended to make those decisions easier to recognize across member states, require cooperation from people with no right to stay, and permit agreements involving return centers outside the Union. But legislation on paper is not a return policy. A return decision that is never enforced becomes an invitation to disappear into the continent. Spain must also demand measurable cooperation from Morocco. European funding, trade privileges, and diplomatic support should be linked to border control, action against smugglers, and lawful readmission. If Morocco cooperates, that should be recognized. If it deliberately relaxes control to gain political concessions, there should be consequences. Human beings cannot become bargaining chips between governments. And Europe cannot outsource its border while pretending that the partner controlling the gate has no power over it. Two dishonest extremes poison this debate. One side sees only vulnerable people and refuses to acknowledge the border. The other sees only a crowd and refuses to acknowledge individual human beings. Neither approach can govern a continent. Europe should be humane toward the person who needs protection. It should be firm toward the person who has no right to remain. It should be relentless toward the smuggler who profits from the journey. And it should protect the officer who faces a genuine threat while defending the frontier. These positions belong together. Ceuta is a warning. It shows what happens when geography, smuggling networks, diplomatic leverage, judicial uncertainty, and contradictory political signals meet at one narrow border. Spain cannot ask Guardia Civil to hold the line while national policy weakens the credibility of return. The European Union cannot promise free movement inside Europe while treating control of its external frontier as optional. And no government can demand that soldiers and police defend that frontier while denying them a clear right to protect their lives. A border remains legitimate only when it is lawful, controlled, and defended. Rescue those in danger. Hear genuine asylum claims. Return those who have no right to stay. Prosecute smugglers. And when an officer faces an immediate deadly attack, allow him to defend life with the force necessary to stop it. Not revenge, not collective punishment, not violence for its own sake. Lawful defense. Europe's border must be humane, but it must also be a border. This was Ollie K. Political. Tell me in the comments, should the European Union adopt a common minimum standard protecting officers who use proportionate force against an immediate threat at its external borders? Thank you for listening.